waiting for the spinning ball to stop spinning. I presume that means it's not broadcasting yet, but if it is, let me make funny faces for you. Okay. Hey, there we go. Hello, my name's Dan Nelson. Maybe you know that. And I am here to do another daily art adventure. Today, very specific instruction. Now, I didn't know exactly what to... Here I am, by the way, in my uber messy garage. I actually like my garage a lot, and I like it to be neat, but I'm not the only one that lives in this house. So, I mean, that partly at the moment, we have 4 grandchildren and a whole bunch of other people living here. So, I don't get in my way, but I love my garage anyway. So ignore the mess. It's my mess. I like it. I want to show you how to strip a canvas. Now, this is only if you have a canvas that has an oil painting that you want to get rid of. This was a demonstration in a class. About 1/2 or 1/3 of my class demos actually turned into good paintings. In fact, a couple of years ago, I got into Oil Painters of America with a class painting that I did as a class demo. When you want to strip a canvas, now you acrylic people, no problem. All you do is gesso the thing with acrylic gesso, and you're ready to go. Oil people, you have a bit more of a problem. And I think I've tried just about everything there is. I've tried Bin's primer. That's an alcohol-based primer. Too brittle, it cracked. I've tried Kills, wrong finish. I've tried, and here's where most artists go, well, why don't you just prime it with an oil primer? Well, the reason is oil primer doesn't have a texture that I like at all. In fact, one time years ago, I went out on a big painting assignment. I had 5 or 6 or 7 canvases with me. They all had oil-primed canvas. Turns out I hate painting on oil-primed canvas. That's weird. I mean, at least maybe not, the store-bought oil-primed is okay. Let me make that clear. Store-bought oil-primed, okay. My oil-primed, didn't like it at all. Way too slick. I am going to try it one more time with some marble powder. I have marble powder. That's a pretty standard gesso product. I should try oil primer with a bunch of marble powder, and see if I like it then. Anyway, there are times when you have to or if you want to, you either have to throw out this canvas, and or you can just paint right over it. I should say, yeah, you oil painters, a lot of us will just start a painting right on top of this. Okay, but that's not my favorite way to operate. So let's talk about how to get rid of what's on here so that we can start a new painting. I've tried everything. I'm going to show you what works best so far. And if anybody out there knows something better, please let me know. First of all, we have some impasto here. When I was doing this class, evidently I wanted to show the students how to do some heavy paint. So I have 2 knives here. They are a regular Swiss Army knife, pocket knife, pen knife you could call it, and a kitchen knife. And I've sharpened both of them in the last few minutes with just a regular household kitchen sharpener. You definitely want a rounded blade to do this. You do not want an X-Acto knife or utility knife with a sharp corner on it. The fact that it's rounded is key. Let me try another one here. So if you feel like this is kind of dangerous, your feelings are correct. Okay? Well, what have you got to lose? By the way, and of course, you could say, well, why are you going to all this work? Can't you just, dash down to your local art supply store and buy another one? Well, I can, because I live only 20 minutes or 10 minutes from at least a art supply store. Not everybody that watches this has that luxury. Plus, I don't have the luxury. For instance, I want to paint today, and for several reasons, I can't leave the house today. It's my job to stay at home today. Those things happen, right? And speaking of which, you understand, especially if you're a professional, right? You could say, well, how much does a new canvas cost? Do you know, by the way, how a professional calculates that? Sure, this canvas only costs $25, right? Give or take, Let's say it costs $20. So why am I wasting all this time to save $20? Well, because that's not how that's not how somebody who's making money, that's not how they think. How much will this cost me to go buy a new one? Do you know what? It'll cost me 25 minutes door to door to get to the art supply store. Walk in, spend $20 for a new canvas, buy several, of course, and buy several other things. I spend 10 minutes in the store, and I drive 20. So 20, 40, 50 minutes of travel. Then there's always a little bit of wastage at each end of a travel. And by the time I get home, I spend an hour. And to me, an hour is $100 worth of time. So the value, not the cost of this canvas, but the value of this canvas suddenly becomes $120. I'm serious as I can be. Okay, now let me tell you what I'm going to do. This is kind of weird. Brace yourself. I'm assuming you can read that. Winsor Newton Brush Cleaner and Restorer. I've been using this for years to restore dead and dying brushes, never dreaming that it was also the ticket to stripping oil painting canvas. I'm just dribbling a little bit, maybe 2 tablespoons there. Then take a rag and spread it around. This is going to be a very short episode because I'm going to let this, I think I need just a tiny bit more. I'm going to let this soak for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and show you step 2. We're going to take this all the way through gessoing. Oh, one more word. Here's kind of a nice side benefit, and that is that a reused canvas, to me, I like the texture better than a brand new canvas. So one slight little benefit of doing all this is I end up with a canvas I actually like better than store-bought. Okay, so that's all for right now. We'll be back in a few minutes to do the stripping process. Thanks for watching. All right, welcome back. Now, this is, of course, part 2. If you're watching this later, it all runs together, I understand. But I just waited 15 minutes, 16 minutes now, from the time that I poured onto this. Do I still have the bottle here? I poured brush cleaner. I think I took it in. Okay, never mind. I took Winsor Newton Brush Cleaner and Restorer and poured it on this painting. What painting, you say? Well, this one. Here's where the business is at today. We are stripping an oil painting. Again, I didn't know what to call this. I mean, it's too long a title. So how to strip a canvas that has an oil painting on it, but that's what we're doing. So I poured the Brush Cleaner Restore, and you can tell that it's working because this is all tacky and sticky. And now here comes the serious business. I've got sandpaper, and here's the counterintuitive part. Listen to this. This is number 50 sandpaper. Let me get another piece over here. This is sandpaper that's about as rough as it comes. Number 50. Very counterintuitive. Because you would think, oh, be careful, be careful. Don't be careful. Now, you do have to be careful on the edges that you don't sand through all the way through to the bare canvas. It's elbow grease time. This is called aerobics oil painting. This is how you get your aerobic workout. You do have to be careful around the edges that you don't want to go too deep. You really don't want to hit bare canvas if you can help it. Again, this is number 50 sandpaper. It's the roughest commercial grade sandpaper I think that's made. Very counterintuitive. You would think, wouldn't you? I thought for years, well, you want to be careful, you want to be delicate. This oil paint is actually surprisingly tough stuff. And if you use a finer grade sandpaper, it'll just gunk up your sandpaper and you won't get any effect at all. These thick parts especially, Now, if you understand my painting technique, you understand that I do acrylics underneath and oil on top. And the oil on top is the only part that I need to remove, because once I get down to acrylics, all is well. As soon as you get down to acrylics, you can gesso the thing with acrylic gesso, right? But if you're just an oil painter and you do what I'm doing here, you want to get down to the white acrylic gesso that was probably under your oil painting. Whew! Yes, sometimes artists get a little workout. Maybe when I'm 90 years old, I won't be able to do this. But I'll worry about that when the time comes. At a sprightly young 64, I'm still certainly capable of doing some physical work. By the way, all you young people, yes, the age of numbers does sneak up on you and you can't believe. I can't believe I'm 64. That just is crazy. But I'd rather be this stage of life than any of my previous stages. Okay, nearly finished here. Nearly finished. Hang just another minute with me. I've got one more trick up my sleeve. One more counterintuitive trick. Oh, by the way, if your painting has varnish on it, then you need to get the varnish off first. And I am not an expert, but I believe it's paint thinner. I believe it's plain old-fashioned, Ace Hardware paint thinner that gets varnish off a painting. But you better Google that. You better look that up, make sure I'm right. Because you have to get the varnish off. The brush cleaner restorer stuff won't do anything to the varnish. So you got to get the varnish off first. Okay. Woo! Now, it's still pretty tacky. I've got one more trick. And I should have had this can down already, but I didn't. So here we go. I want, no, not acetone. Okay, hang on. I'm going to run away for just a second. I'll be back in just a second. Sorry about that. Okay. My hip flask full of whiskey. Well, maybe not quite. More like filled with denatured alcohol. That's what we're looking for. Now, why denatured alcohol? And by the way, if somebody out there knows a better way to strip canvases than what I'm doing, I am all ears. But I will tell you that my technique is the result of many experiments and many years of experiments. Okay, that denatured alcohol is having quite the effect, which is what I want. I was going to say, why denatured alcohol? Well, because denatured alcohol, I don't know if you know this or not, if you paint with acrylics, you should know this. Denatured alcohol is a solvent for acrylic paints. That is to say, denatured alcohol eats acrylic paints. And eats acrylic paints is exactly what I want to have happen here on this canvas. I want this alcohol to go through whatever's left of the oil paint and go down to the acrylic level, acrylic layer, and and liven it up. And in a few minutes, I'm going to let this dry. In a few minutes, we're going to come back and sand this one more time, and then we're going to be ready to start gessoing it. So there you go. Brush cleaner, wait 15 minutes, sand the thing with real rough sandpaper, then rub it down with denatured alcohol. That's what we've done so far. I'll be back again in a few minutes. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned if you want to watch. Hello, welcome back to stripping and oil painting off a canvas so that you can reuse it. And just to repeat, if you're painting in acrylics, it's no problem. You don't have to strip it. You just apply an acrylic gesso. You can sand it down if it's got big bumps on it, but generally no problem at all. The problem comes, what do you do with an oil painting that you want to reuse the canvas? Now, this is only, it's cheaper to go buy one, but there are times, for many reasons, when that's not a good option. Like today, I'm home taking care of Grandma, and so I can't go anywhere, and I want to get some paintings done. I'm actually working on 3 canvases at the same time, but this is the one I started you with. Again, I used Winsor Newton Brush Cleaner and Restorer. Winsor Newton Brush Cleaner and Restorer. Bottle about this big with red lettering on it, red label. And you put that on, leave it, let it sit for 15 minutes, and come back and scrub it off with real rough sandpaper, the very roughest that you can make, which is very counterintuitive. You would think you'd want gentle, but nope, rough sandpaper. Then, next thing, very important, denatured alcohol. And by the way, I'm assuming that you understand, I am not talking about rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol will not work. It has to be, by the way, I Googled what does denatured mean. Turns out it's actually ethanol, right? I'm looking for what it is, and this alcohol actually would be drinkable, so they put poison in it. That's what denatured means. They put a poison in it so people won't drink it, so they don't have to pay alcohol tax, liquor tax. Is that funny? That's funny. Anyway, rubbing alcohol won't work. This will work. It's very strong stuff. And what you have to do is pour it on the painting and rub it and rub it and rub it. Now I've done this like several times while you weren't looking. I showed you the first time, until all the gunk is off it. Now, I believe, I'm not, the only experts at this subject will be the people who look at these paintings 100 years from now and find out if my method worked. Until then, we're just guessing. Now, I know we're good for 15 or 20 years, but 100 years? Who knows? But I think we probably are, because the stuff that is left on this canvas now is sort of a slurry, a mixture of oil paint residue and acrylic residue. Are you with me? It's a little bit tacky, just a little bit, and maybe you should wait until tomorrow when it's all dry. But I'll tell you this, and this is just intuition. I'm pretty good with intuiting materials. My guess is that the tackiness here will actually cause it to combine pretty well with the gesso. So here again, here's a store brand Jerry's gesso. I found it. It says world's greatest. Who knows if that's true? That's just pure marketing. But it seems like pretty good gesso. Okay, so rule number 1. What? Not rule number 1. Application. Layer number 1. By the way, when I started forcing my left hand to paint with my left hand, this is one of the very first jobs that I gave my left hand to do. I was so uncoordinated with my left hand, but I was forcing myself to learn how to paint with 2 hands. And I said, okay, left hand, you're going to gesso the canvas. My left hand said, Amy, I don't like gessoing canvas. I said, shut up, gesso the canvas. And yeah, that's many years ago now, 12, 13 years ago now. And as you probably know, I'm very comfortable now painting with 2 hands. But just kind of interesting that this is where it all started. Okay, here's the thing I think you need to make sure to do with your first coat of gesso. Make sure that it's thin. You can hardly see what I'm doing, can you? Let me move you down here a little bit. Make sure that it's a very, very thin coat of gesso. Why? Because I don't trust thick gesso to cling to that slurry I was talking about a little while ago. I don't trust thick gesso to adhere, but I very much trust a thin coat of gesso, because in a way, with all this rubbing, I'm sort of, I think at a molecular level, I'm mixing this gesso with that top layer of stickiness. You know, stickiness means it's not inert. Stickiness means it hasn't settled down. So by applying a thin coat of gesso, I think I'm actually stirring together, in a sense, that what was sticky with this layer of gesso. And I wouldn't trust that stirring process. I think it'd be too much gesso for the amount of stick. Boy, I hope you're following this. Does that make sense? So I feel very, very confident that I'm achieving, and that's enough. I'm just make sure it's well stirred, if you will. I think I'm achieving a very dependable bond on this canvas, and that's the hard part. How do you get paint, you know, to stick to a canvas that had oil paint on it? So there you do. It was a two-step stripping process, then a one-step mixing process, and in a few minutes I'm going to come back and apply a second coat. The second coat can be thick, relatively thick, because it's going to be sticking to this coat, and you know, acrylic on acrylic is a very happy combination. Okay, so again, wait just a few minutes. I'll be back in a little bit, and you can watch me do the finishing touches. Hello, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. I've been talking about how to strip. You've got a canvas with an oil painting on it, and you want to reuse it. What do you do? Especially if that's a problem, especially for me, or people like me, that start their paintings with acrylic. Do I get it? Yeah. Let me address this right now. There are some experts who say you should not paint oil on top of acrylics. Now, I contend that 99% of the people in the Western world are in fact painting oil on top of acrylic, because most of the time they buy a gessoed canvas from the factory, from the store, and that quote-unquote gesso, it's not literally gesso, but that we call it gesso, is an acrylic product. So most people, you know. And the other thing is, nobody will know for 100 years if I'm right or they're right. So all we can do is guess. That's, you know, there's scientists trying to figure out, but people like me, we're just guessing. Okay, so I think it's okay to paint acrylic under oil, but that creates a real problem for me if I've got a finished oil painting. So I've shown you the first two steps. It dawned on me the last, a few minutes ago, when I was talking about the denatured alcohol. You'll notice I have a terry cloth rag. That's one of those rags that has a little, this is all dirty, of course, because I've been using it, but it's the rough kind of rag. And that's the kind I think you want. And it took me several applications of denatured alcohol and rubbing with a rag to get the gunk. After I used the brush restorer, okay, that ate up the oil paint and then sanded it. Okay, so I just want to make sure I rubbed it 2 or 3 or 4 times with the denatured alcohol and rag. Just want to make sure you understand that this is not a quick operation. And now I have done the first layer of gesso, which, as you heard me say, I do very thin. And now this feels quite dry, ready for gesso number 2. Now, since it's been a long time since I did a instructional video on doing gesso, so it might be a good idea to talk about powdered marble or marble powder. Gesso, when it's dry, and by the way, some people like to sand the gesso. I do not, because I like a toothy gesso surface. That's just me. But your gesso, when it's dry, should have a definite rough tooth, rough, scratchy feeling to it. It should not be glassy smooth. Oil paint sticks to this through a mechanical bond. That is, you know, one molecule of oil hangs onto a molecule of gesso and holds it on the canvas that way. So you want to have you have to want to have a reasonable amount of grit, bite on this so that the oil will adhere. And by the way, frankly, that's why I think that the way I paint acrylics underneath and oil on top works is two reasons. One is it's not thick acrylic most of the time. And number two, I use liquid, which liquid happens to have a very, what's the word, friendly relation. That's not what I'm looking for, but a very friendly relationship with acrylic. So anyway, one of the things you can do is take marble powder and add, I'm just going to add a little bit to the top of this. There's not much. This bucket of acrylic has only got about 2 inches left in the bottom. And then stir that up, mix that up a little bit. And especially I think if you're using a cheap gesso, which this gesso seems to be just fine, you might want to add some marble powder. So some of you have never heard of that. Just, you know, for what it's worth, you'll run into somebody some smart aleck person saying, yeah, you should use marble powder. Or at least you heard it from me, and I'm not being smart alecky about it. So you can say, oh yeah, I heard about that. And I'm telling you that's an option. It's not, you know, no, it's not like it won't make you a better painter necessarily if you add marble to your okay, now this is me. This does not have to be you, but I, as you can tell, I'm applying a much thicker coat of gesso to the second layer, and this might be the final layer. I don't know. I won't know till it dries, so it'll be a couple hours before I know if I want to do any more. But I do random brush strokes, and again, I'm using my favorite kind of brush, which is chip brush, so it leaves a good texture. That, again, that's just me. I like a very textured surface to paint on, not a smooth one. Maybe if I'm doing portraits, but yeah, not even that. Because I don't need help being smooth with my portraits. I need help being more like John Singer Sargent, not smooth. So even for my portraits, generally speaking, I don't want a very smooth surface. Now, let's bring up another debatable. I just went in and did a bunch of research because I wanted to see what other people had. I only found one person on the Artist Network website, that's a pretty good website, who agreed with me that if you really want a canvas to last more than 150 years, it is a good idea to gesso the back. Now, there's different, I mean, I just read it. They are all over the map on this subject, and for different reasons. And a lot of people sounded very intelligent about why you should or why you should not do this. Again, nobody will know for 100 years who's right. But some people say, well, doesn't the canvas need to breathe? Well, as a matter of fact, the canvas breathing is in fact one of the bad things for oil painting. Oil painting, if you really want oil painting to last, by the way, don't paint on canvas, paint on board. I have one painting I did 20 years ago where we were learning the technique of Frank Covino. Some of you have heard, Google him, Frank Covino. A real, what's the word? Eclectic, that's not the word I'm looking for, oddball. I like it. I say that with great affection. Real unusual guy in the art world. As you can see, I'm trying to gesso even down there underneath that wood. So as you can see, I don't normally gesso the back of my canvas, but since I'm doing a video on the subject, I thought, well, I'll go ahead and do it this one time when you guys are watching. Oil paint does not like to breathe. It does not like to have movement underneath it. So actually, if you want your oil painting to last 1,000 years, there are a whole bunch of things you could do, and you should paint on aluminum or wood if you gesso both sides and the edges very, very thoroughly. I was going to say that's what I did with the Frank Covino painting that I did 20 years ago. We did 4, 5, or 6 coats of gesso on the front and the back of the wood panel, and the edges, by the way. So we completely sealed up that piece of wood. So that was Frank Covino's theory on the subject. But the canvas does not need to breathe, in my opinion. Again, somebody who's real young, come back in 100 years and let me know if this is a good idea, would you? Okay, thanks. So I think we're done with how to, I may do another coat, but you don't need to watch me do that. This has a pretty rough texture and I like it. Been a good day. Hope you had some canvases you need to recover. Thanks so much, guys.